نحمده ونصلي على رسول النبي الكريم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام عليك يا سيد المرسلين يا خاتم النبيين يا شفيع المذنبين يا أنيس الغريبين يا رحمة للعالمين صلى الله عليك وعلى آله وسلم. Inshallah, we'll continue with the road to Karbala. And this past Friday, we were talking about basically the journey of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and then some issues, or I started mentioning some things later on, which I'm going to go over a little later as well, inshallah. But we were talking about, once he arrived in Mecca, then, everybody, of course, news spread very rapidly that he did not give allegiance to Yazid. And so, those who were against the kingship of Yazid started sending him letters, and these letters mainly were coming from Kufa, because the people of Iraq did not want Yazid as the king. And so, they had previously shown loyalty to Sayyidina Ali karamallahu wajh, and then again to Imam Hassan alayhi salam. However, you have a significant population there, when things got tough, would change their stance. We see this in the case of Sayyidina Ali karamallahu wajh, when he, after the Battle of Siffin, these are the same people who during the battle laid down their weapons, and then after arbitration, then they start accusing Ali of accepting arbitration when the only authority is Allah's authority. And of course, they abuse and misuse the Quran. And then they eventually also, abandoned him. And then when Imam Hassan alayhi salam decided to hand over the rule, there were many who were upset and also turned against him. So now you have these same people writing Imam Hussein alayhi salam letters to come. And if he comes, then they will support him and all these promises that they give him. And if he doesn't come, then they will, and they are forced to give allegiance to Yazid, who most people recognized as being not just an illegitimate ruler, but also having nothing to do with the religion. And so they would hold him responsible for if they ended up being forced to give allegiance to Yazid. And this is when he sent Muslim bin Aqil, his cousin, radiallahu anhu, to go and investigate the situation. And when he arrives, initially everything is really good. You have thousands of people coming and giving him allegiance. And they are in essence giving allegiance to Imam Hussein alayhi salam, that when he comes, we will defend him and support him and do whatever is necessary. Basically, the allegiance, when you take allegiance, then it's basically, bay'ah is in essence selling yourself. That I've sold myself to the one I'm giving allegiance to. And if he orders me, whatever he orders me to do, then I will obey his orders, And so you choose people, if you're going to give allegiance to somebody, you want to make sure that they are in line. You give allegiance to the one who will make you closer to Allah and His Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and give you the right aqeedah. And of course, who could be better at that than Imam Hussein alayhi salam? So that allegiance includes that whatever he commands me to do, I will do it. Of course, you had a time when you had people that were taking the allegiance who were true to their word, that they would guide you in the direction of Allah and His Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And also the people giving the allegiance were true to their word. But then over time, you have this where, the people giving the allegiance would abandon the allegiance when it was convenient for them. And they would stick to it again when it was convenient for them. And now you have a time, unfortunately, where you have many people taking allegiances, but they don't direct you in the direction of Allah and His Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the people giving the allegiance also, is the same thing whenever it's convenient, whatever is convenient. My father, Sheikh, he said, people complain that it's hard to find a sheikh or a pir or a murshid. And he says, my complaint is it's hard to find someone who, a murid or a student, whoever's coming, they have some worldly gain that they're looking for. And so this isn't anything new, but of course now the ratios have shifted to where you get most of this and less of the decency. So anyway, so all these people gave allegiance, and this is when Muslim bin Aqil, radiallahu anhu, he writes a letter to Imam Hussein al-Islam telling him the situation is very good. The people are very, seem to be very sincere and loyal, so come. And so, he starts making arrangements to leave. And when people realize that he's about to leave, many of the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which included Abdullah ibn Umar, Abdullah ibn Abbas, Abdullah ibn Ja'far. Abdullah ibn Ja'far is his brother-in-law. Okay. Abdullah ibn Zubair, and so many others. They came to him and said, look, don't go. Please don't go. Okay. And so you have people today who use these statements of theirs against Imam Hussein al-Islam, or these requests of theirs against Imam Hussein al-Islam. They say, see, the companions, they tried to stop him, but he didn't listen. He went. And the implication, or what they're implying there, is that these companions were saying that Imam Hussein al-Islam was doing something wrong, which is not what they're saying. If you listen to their whole statements, they say, look, please don't go. You know what these people did to your father and what they did to your brother. This is what they said. They said, you can't trust these people. Don't go. And it's interesting, Abdullah ibn Zubair, radiallahu anhu, he says to Imam Hussein al-Islam, when he requests him not to go, Imam Hussein al-Islam, he says that my grandfather has told me that the Kaaba will be desecrated because of a lamb. And I don't want to be that lamb. These are things that had not dawned on the people at this point. Because there's this, like we've talked about, the mindset of the vast majority of people, with the exception of Imam Hussein al-Islam and those who are with him, was that, who's gonna do anything against the Kaaba? Who's gonna do anything against Imam Hussein al-Islam? How could anybody do things like this? Who would ransack and destroy Medina Munawwara and use the Masjid of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as a stable to park the horses, to tie the horses? Who could violate the women of Medina Munawwara? Who would dare do this? And everybody's Muslim. And you got the whole empire saying, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. Who could dare do anything like that? But Imam Hussein al-Islam understood. He knew. And he says this to Abdullah ibn Zubair, and the interesting thing is that Abdullah ibn Zubair is that lamb. Later on, after the martyrdom of Imam Hussein al-Islam and Ayyam al-Hurra, when he declares the Khilafah, the army of Yazid attacks Mecca. And what do? They catapult fire into Mecca, and the Kaaba, the roof of the Kaaba is burnt. The horns of the ram that Ibrahim al-Islam had slaughtered were still in there. They were burnt. 3 of the walls of the Kaaba fell. This is what Imam Hussein al-Islam is saying. This is why he left Medina Munawwara. Because he knew. And of course, Imam Hussein al-Islam is not one who can give allegiance to falsehood. So there's no way he can give allegiance to Yazid. But he also knows that Yazid has no limits. Falsehood has no limits. They have no boundaries. It's like today. They talk about the Geneva Convention, the Geneva Convention. Who's following the Geneva Convention? It's just the rules on paper. They don't mean anything. They violate every day. And they say, oh, we're a rules-based order, law-based society. Yeah, might is right is what's going on, and what's been going on for a long time, which goes against the principles of Islam. And so this is why Imam Hussein al-Islam, there's no way he can give allegiance to Yazid. And at the same time, he realizes that his presence there, simply his presence there, endangers the whole place. This is why he chose to leave Medina and come to Mecca, and why he will choose to leave Mecca and go towards Kufa at the expense of himself and his household. And so, when the letter of Muslim bin Aqil comes, again, he starts making preparations. These companions come and they say, oh Imam, Imam Hussein, Ya Hussein alayhi salam, please don't do this. Stay here, we'll support you. But also that example had to be given. You look in the Quran, there is an example of every verse in the Quran. There were some verses whose examples could not be fulfilled during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we've talked about, like the verse in Surah Hujurat where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about 2 parties, having a conflict. And even after one party is shown to be right, the other party still does not accept. But they're 2 parties of Muslims. So the command is that everybody together force the other party to accept. This verse, as we've talked about so many times, could not be fulfilled during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Why? Because during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if there was a conflict, who would make the decision? Rasulullah. And anyone who did not accept his decision was no longer Muslim. And this verse clearly indicates that both parties are Muslim, and they're still Muslim even after one is not accepting. And Imam Shafi'i rahmatullahi alayhi, he says that he took all of the laws and regulations from this verse from the Battle of Siffin between Ali and Muawiyah radiallahu anhu. Alright. So, there is a verse in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about test, which is in Surah Baqarah, where he says, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. And we will surely test you of something, of hunger, of fear and hunger and loss of wealth and your lives and loss of your offspring. and glad tidings to those who are patient. So if you look at throughout the Quran, there is no example of this, because the criteria is and, meaning all 5 of these test all at the same time. You know, you look at the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, you have, you know, loss of, you have fear and you have loss of offspring, but you don't have the others. You look at this, or at least not at one time, and then other times you have loss of the wealth, but they're not all at the same time. You have 1 or 2, and then you have a pause, and then you have, you know, something else, and then something else. You know, you look at various stories throughout the Quran, this is what you see. So we have to have that example where everything is all at once. And who better to give that example than the household of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You know, this again also could not occur in the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because if you lose all of this, then there's nothing to recover from. So, yeah. So you have this example in the household of Rasulullah from Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Again, because these are the people, not only in whose house the Quran was revealed, but these are people, the literal people who are the walking, talking, living Quran. And so, you know, this is what he must do to give us that example, so that later generations will know what to do. And so, in the meantime, as Imam Hussein alayhi salam is leaving Makkah, and we'll come back to his departure of Makkah, what happens in Kufa is that the governor of Kufa at this time, when Muslim bin Aqil radiallahu arrived, was Nu'man bin Bashir radiallahu anhu, who was a companion of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was the son of the Ansar, so he also was Ansar. And he was, you know, young during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and so he's the governor of Kufa. And when Yazid, you know, through his spies, you know, news reaches him as to what's going on in Kufa, he sends a letter to Ibn Ziyad. So Ibn Ziyad, Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, is a sort of cousin of Yazid. And I say sort of cousin because it's kind of yeah, it's kind of complicated, but I'll try to explain it in the simplest way. His father, Ziyad, was not a legitimate child. His mother accused Abu Sufyan of being his father, Ziyad. So this is Ibn Ziyad's grandmother accused Abu Sufyan of being the father of this son. He refused, okay, but then he denied it, okay. But then later on, for political reasons, he was brought into the fold and accepted as, you know, part of the family, because he was, so the son Ibn Ziyad is this ruthless authoritarian, ruthless ruler who, when you need something tough done, you know, he's the man, because he has no limits. So Ibn Ziyad at this time was the governor of Basra. And so a letter is sent to him that, look, this is what's going on over there. You need to stop Hussein alayhi salam no matter what, however you do it. So, and if you do this, then you will also be made the governor of Kufa. And you're being sent to replace Nu'man bin Bashir in Kufa, and you have full authority to do whatever you want to do, whatever you have to do to fulfill this mission. So he arrives at night. And of course, at this point, everything is an allegation that allegedly Imam Hussein al-Islam's coming, and allegedly the people are supporting him. So Ibn Ziyad, he needs to confirm this. So he arrives there in the middle of the night. He comes dressed as the people of Hijaz, which is, Makkah, Medina. So he's pretending like he's Imam Hussein al-Islam, comes with two other people, kind of face is a little covered up, so no one really can see him properly. He arrives at the governor's house, knocks on the door in the middle of the night. Nu'man bin Bashir opens the door and looks, and he thinks it's Imam Hussein al-Islam, and he says to Imam Hussein al-Islam that, it might not have been good that you came, because situation, over here is not very good. And this confirms to Ibn Ziyad, okay, everything that we heard was true. So he basically tells Nu'man bin Bashir, get out, and he takes over. And first thing he does is he arrests all of the nobles or the chieftains of Kufa that he can. And he puts some under house arrest. And, so when this happens, all the people come to Muslim bin Aqil and they say to him, look, we, all of this is going on. You need to come with us and we will support you. Lead us and we will support you. So they march to the governor's house, and Ibn Ziyad comes out, and they of course are demanding, comes out and he threatens them. He threatens to kill all their chieftains and threatens to kill all of them. And he has the full backing of the state to do whatever he wants. Muslim bin Aqil radiyallahu anhu turns around, and all these thousands of people who had come supporting him are gone. Just took one threat and they're gone. So long story short, he goes into hiding. Eventually Muslim bin Aqil is found out and arrested. And he's taken brought to Ibn Ziyad. Ibn Ziyad says, tells him to curse Ali and Hussein, and we will let you free. And when he came to Kufa, he came with two of his sons. The sons are still in hiding. And so he gets... So, Muslim bin Aqil, he says, look, if I'm gonna do this, I need to make these statements in front of people. So when they called, the people to come, when he makes a statement, he, instead of saying what Ibn Ziyad wanted, he praises Imam Hussein al-Islam and praises Ali radiyallahu and curses Yazid, And cursing here isn't like foul mouth cursing, This is where he says, may Allah's curse be upon Yazid. Or Allah's curse is upon Yazid. Okay? It's not like, just foul mouth. And when he does this, they execute him. The day he is executed is the day that Imam Hussein al-Islam is leaving Makkah. And again, we have to keep reminding ourselves, this is not the time of phones or Skype, or, this isn't even the time when you could send a telegram. It would take by normal routes, it would take days, if not weeks, for news to reach from Kufa to Mecca. Okay. At the same time, this is the time of Hajj. So you have many people coming for the Hajj from all parts of the Muslim empire, including Kufa. And so when they, so of course, there's not like, okay, they can immediately be notified that, oh, he's been martyred, you need to stay where you are. So the day that Imam Hussein al-Islam leaves Mecca, again, is the 8th of Zil Hajj, which is the day that the rites of the Hajj began. Everybody is coming into Mecca, heading towards Mina to begin the rituals of the Hajj. And Imam Hussein al-Islam is leaving Mecca towards Kufa, which in itself has so many lessons for us. When you look at Hajj, yes, Hajj is an obligation, but Hajj is an obligation once in your lifetime. You look at, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, after the declaration of prophethood, he only made one Hajj. Even though for the first 13 years he was in Mecca. So one point somebody can say, well, Hajj wasn't an obligation at that time, which it was not. But these people still made Hajj. Before the declaration of Islam, there are narrations where he's in Arafah on the day of Hajj. So he's making the Hajj. And of course, he's making the Hajj very different than the people of Makkah used to make the Hajj. Quraysh used to say, we are the people of the Haram, we don't go to Arafah, because Arafah is outside of the Haram. Again, and even after Rasulullah immigrates to Medina Munawwara, it's like 8th year, Makkah is now open, right? He could have stuck around a little bit longer and made the Hajj that year. Because Ramadan of the 8th year of Hijrah is when Makkah is conquered. Then he stayed there basically another month. They laid the siege to Taif, and then eventually he leaves. He could have stayed another month and made the Hajj, but he didn't. Then that next year, he sends Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu as the Amir of the Hajj. It's not until the last year, the 10th year, then he makes the Hajj. Imam Hassan al-Islam made many Hajj, but the situation was very different. When the situation was very different, they used to go for Hajj often. But when you have other situations that come up, if you make the obligatory Hajj, there are other things that take priority. People are going to say, oh, you're talking against the Hajj. No, I'm not. But everything has its place. And at this time, people are going for the Hajj without the realization of what's going on all around them. That the heart of the religion has been ripped out. That people are willing to accept such a man as their ruler. thinking that, oh, everything is fine. And this is what Imam Hussein al-Islam is going to save. He's going to give life back to that heart. And nothing matters. I mean, you think about your own body. I rip your heart out. Anything else matter at that point? No. No. Nothing else matters. And the heart is what supplies the nutrients to all of the rest of the body, including the brain. You rip that out and everything starves. There is no nourishment for anything. And when the spirit has been ripped out, there is no nourishment for the soul. You know, when the aqidah is being changed and the people don't realize it. When the practices are being changed and the people overlook it. What is left? So yeah, you can go and make the Hajj all you want. Doesn't mean anything. You know, just like when Rasulullah, when he describes the Khawarij, he's telling the companions, you will be ashamed when you look at them of your actions, because your actions compared to their actions will be nothing. Well, in appearance. But in reality, of course, one of the actions of those who are decent outweigh millions of actions of those who are not. Actually, not just millions, infinite actions of those who are not. Yeah. So when he leaves, or as he's leaving, you know, again, even at that last moment, there are companions coming to him and asking him, and even other people from Makkah coming in and asking him, please don't go. And again, the argument isn't that you're going to do that you're leaving is wrong, or what you're going to do is wrong, because it's not. The argument is that, you know, these are not people that can be trusted. They will betray you. And even that, Imam Hussein al-Islam already knows that. So it's not like they're telling him something he doesn't already know. But he also knows the mission that must be fulfilled. And he says to one of them, he says to Abdullah ibn Ja'far, I'm going, you know, to fulfill the promise I made to my grandfather. To save this religion, to save the true way of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this is why he's going. The reality of what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam brought. Knowing the price that will be paid. As he's leaving, there was a man named Farazdaq, who was a poet. According to most scholars, he is the best Arabic poet ever. His best poem is the one that he does in honor of Imam Zain al-Abidin years later, which is why he will eventually get put in jail. Farazdaq is interesting because he's known to the household. the household of Rasulullah know him because his father was one of the Shia, or one of the supporters of Sayyidina Ali Karamallahu wajh. He fought alongside Ali in the Battle of the Camel, as well as Siffin. And he brought his son, who was a young man at that time, who was very eloquent in the language, after the Battle of the Camel, to Sayyidina Ali Karamallahu wajh, and he said, use him. Because at that time, the media was poetry. So he asked Ali to use him. You can use him to, to strengthen your position and spread propaganda against your enemies. And Ali said, he said no. He said, he told Farazdak, he said, go memorize the Quran. And Farazdak tried, but never completed it. But again, he's this very eloquent poet. And so he was coming for the Hajj with his mother, and he was coming from Kufa. And Imam Hussein al-Islam asked him, he said, what is the condition of the people of Kufa? And he says that their hearts are with you, but their swords are with Banu Umayyah. And at this time, Farazdak doesn't even know what's happened to Muslim bin Aqil in Kufa. Says, yeah, their hearts are with you, but their swords are with Banu Umayyah. Meaning, they would like to support you, but when push comes to shove, they will pull their swords out, for what is convenient for them. And so they leave, and another interesting conversation that takes place is between Farazdak and Abdullah ibn Amr radiallahu anhu. So Abdullah ibn Amr radiallahu, when he sees Farazdak and he sees Imam Hussein al-Islam leaving, so he says to Farazdak, he says, why don't you go with him? You want to go with him, which he did. He says, I would go with him if I wasn't afraid of what they will do to him. Because Farazdak also understood that these people have no limits. And so Abdullah ibn Amr, he says to Farazdak, he said, what will they do to him? This is the grandson of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Who would dare do anything to him? And that's like we've talked about before. The decent people got too comfortable, while the indecency, spread right under their noses. And so they continued on, the journey starts. And so they leave. You have to remember, and as I spoke about or mentioned this Friday, traveling back then was not easy, period. It wasn't like you got in a car, turned the air conditioner on. And of course, this is when Karbala happened, it was October. However, you're still in the desert. The days still get hot. The nights might get cool, but the days still get hot. And and it's not winter. It is the beginning of fall, which means it's still hot. Okay. So, and of course, you don't have rest areas along the way. A lot of these, you by this point do have some markings as far as where you are, but again, you're traveling in the desert. So even traveling by yourself is not easy. When you're traveling with women and children, it's exponentially more difficult. If it's just, if it was just men, they could use, the sky as their tent. But that's not the situation here. And every time they stop, they got to put up some shelter. for the women and the children, at least. And then, the next day, pick up everything, wrap it up, get it set, and then head out. Yeah. But Imam Hussein al-Islam, when he leaves Mecca, he leaves with 72 people. Okay. So amongst the 72, roughly about a third of them are family members. And roughly, the other 2/3, or roughly about 40 of them, are friends and supporters. So amongst the family members, you have the half-brothers of Imam Hussein al-Islam, 5 of them, the most famous of whom is Abbas, who will be the flag bearer of Imam Hussein al-Islam. Okay. You also have 4 of the sons of Imam Hassan al-Islam. The most famous of those is Imam Qasim. You have, you have wives of these people as well. You have the sister of Imam Hussein al-Islam, Bibi Zainab, along with another sister, Ruqayya, and the 2 sons of Bibi Zainab, Muhammad and Aoun. They're also on this journey. You have the 3 sons of Imam Hussein al-Islam, his 2 wives, Sherbano, Bibi Sherbano and Bibi Rubab. And then you have cousins, the sons or the brothers of Muslim bin Aqil, and as I said, then you have supporters. So this is the group that's going. And when, so again, and they're not armed. Okay. Yeah, they have their swords, they have certain weapons that you would use when you're traveling. And in Arabia, if you're just traveling with your sword, it's not like, that's not a declaration of war. The sword was for men part of their dress. I mean, the sword was used for many things, including fighting, but for many other things as well. So simply somebody traveling with a sword was not an act of war. And then you have some that have their bows, but again, it's not like, okay, they are leaving, all ready for war and dressed for war. And again, you're not going to be leaving for war, taking the women and children like you are with you. So along the way, they arrive, or, as they're going, eventually news reaches them that Muslim bin Aqil has been martyred. And when this happens, of course, amongst them, you have some people who are very upset and confused as to what has happened. Of course, there is mashura, or a gathering, and they decide what to do. And the decision is made to keep moving forward, because this is, their purpose, and so they decide that they will keep moving forward, and they do. And eventually, you have the first army of Yazid that comes to intercept them. And the leader of the army, the general of this army, is a man named Hur bin Yazid. Hur, the son of Yazid, but a different Yazid. So you gotta keep that in mind. Yazid was a common name back then. And it's still common amongst certain groups. But generally, when you hear about those groups, you know who they are. Okay, but so Imam Hussein al-Islam, when this army arrives, he moves forward, and then Hur, the general, comes, and Hur, has been given instructions or orders to arrest Imam Hussein al-Islam along with his companions and bring them, basically in shackles to Kufa. So Hurr's army basically has about 1,000 men in it, which is interesting. You have 1,000 armed soldiers being sent to arrest 72 people. Yeah. Now, before this, though, along the way, when people had heard that Imam Hussein al-Islam is traveling, they came and joined him. So you have some people that have come and joined him. But when this first army shows up, many of those people fell away. Again, convenience. Not people who are dedicated to the cause, but simply, I want to be associated with someone that they know is decent, so long as it's convenient. And so in the conversation between Hurr and Imam Hussein alayhi salam, Hurr initially is kind of aggressive, stating that you have rebelled against the Islamic State. I'm to arrest you and do all of these things. And Imam Hussein al-Islam says, look, I have been invited to Kufa. I'm not going to Kufa because I decided, one day I'm going to go to Kufa. He says, I was invited to Kufa. And he has one of his men bring the letters out that was sent to him by the people of Kufa and shows Hurr. And Hurr, of course, is in shock. Hurr is a man who has decency in him. Of course, he is an employee of the state, and not just any employee, a high-ranking employee within the state. So as people that have that employee mindset, whatever the employer tells them, that's what they're going to do. So he still has that mindset at this point. But again, he has some decency, and he understands to some limit the maqam and the status of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and he respects him. So as soon as he sees those letters, that initial kind of aggressive stance backs down, and he says, well, I had no knowledge of this. He says, I swear I had no knowledge of this. And then he says to Imam Hussein, he says, look, my orders are to arrest you and take you to Kufa. And you're headed towards Kufa anyway. Right? So you're going to Kufa. My army will simply walk alongside your people. No one's getting arrested. We're not going to take you in shackles and chains or anything. So you're headed towards Kufa. We're headed towards Kufa. We'll just march together. Not together, but the army will be separate. They will march, and they kept marching. The interesting thing is that during this whole time, and you have to also understand what many people don't think about is that these armies weren't simple soldiers. The soldiers of today, if you look at the soldiers of today, most of them are ignorant except for that one little task that they're given in the army. This is who they recruit or who they push. They want to push people who don't have a very broad background, who don't understand, geopolitics, who don't understand what's going on, because then they want to use them, as pawns in their scheme of control and power. And so this is why they go after kids that are in high school, and even other places, same thing. They go after them, and why they have like all of these programs to indoctrinate kids in, right at the beginning of high school, even in middle school. And so then they can pull you in. But what's happening these days is people get pulled in, and once they get pulled in, there's a decent number of them, more so than used to be. who once they get pulled in start realizing, oh, this is very different than what we were told. This is altogether different than what we were told. This has nothing to do with defense and honor and all of the things, all the brainwashing that took place. This is something, this is all about money and power and greed. And so, but people that were getting pulled into these armies back then were people generally who were knowledgeable about various other things. Okay, so here the people of Kufa, of course, are getting drafted or recruited into the military under threat. Okay, if you don't do this, then we'll kill your, the elders in your family. We'll do this, we'll do that. And then you do have some of them who come in, because that's who they are. You have within these armies scholars, Huffaz, Hafiz of Quran, scholars of the time, and various other people in various positions. And so, even like the generals, generally the general of the army is the one who would lead the salat, who would lead all of the religious obligations of the army, for the army. Just like the mayors of the various provinces are the ones who would lead salat and Eid salat and Jummah salat and give the khutbah and all of these things. So these weren't people who had no religious background or no religious knowledge. These are people who had religious knowledge. But Hur, what he does, which is interesting, is that whenever time for salat would come, his army would make salat themselves, and Hur would come and make salat behind Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And he'd do this every salat. And so, that's... So he has, like I said, he has this understanding that most of the people, other people are denying. Yeah, they might know it, but they don't acknowledge it. Okay. He knows who Imam Hussein al-Islam is, and he is acknowledging who he is. But he's also under the delusion still at this point that some agreement will be reached. And he'll be under that delusion until the last moment, until Imam Hussein al-Islam comes and pulls him out of the wrong ranks and pulls him into the right ranks. So I'm going to end with this aspect of this today, but there was something that I alluded to this past Friday that I started talking a little bit about, but I want to kind of cover a little bit more in detail. And then in the end, kind of mention a couple of things that are going on right now. So what I said was, there are many charges or accusations that, all of these hadiths, that talk about the virtues of Ahlul Bayt or the virtues of Ali, the vast majority of them are fabricated. So, this is what their accusation is. Oh, those are all abrogated. This is abrogated, that's abrogated. And so long as it doesn't fit their agenda, then, see, this is just, it's just not abrogated, but they're fabricated. This is fabricated. All of this is fabricated. So this is, again, if it doesn't fit their agenda, show me in Bukhari or Muslim. Okay. And the interesting thing is when you show them in Bukhari or Muslim, then, then there's some other excuse or explanation for it. Okay. And this is how they always, they do this. So now I need to look at the statements of those who came before, the pious predecessors. And what did they say about these hadiths? So if I look at Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, And he is very significant because one, you know, he is one of the imams of the Ahl Sunnah. He is one of the main teachers of Imam Bukhari. He is, you know, if you look at like, you know, these so-called scholars in Saudi Arabia, many of them claim to be Hanbali. So they claim to be following the madhab of Imam Ahmad, or the methodology of Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal. And so, you know, so well, if you're going to follow his methodology or his, you know, or him, then okay, well, what did he say about this issue? And his statement is that there are more verses of the Quran revealed in honor of Sayyidina Ali Karamallahu Wajh and Ahlul Bayt than anyone else by far. And he says that there are at least 313 verses of the Quran that were revealed in honor of Ali radiallahu and Ahlul Bayt. Okay. And he also says that they are by far more Sahih hadith, authentic hadith, in honor of Ali radiallahu and about the virtues of Ali radiallahu and Ahlul Bayt than any other companion, by far. So this is his statement. Okay. When his son asked him, Abdullah, his son, Abdullah ibn Ahmad, asked Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal about the virtues of Ali, he said, look, he said, you know, it's very simple to understand. All you have to understand is that Ali had many, many enemies. He had no shortage of enemies. But none of them could produce anything against Ali. They could not bring anything against him as far as any proof of anything. You know, like these days, expose so-and-so, expose so-and-so. And they show you all this proof. All the enemies of Ali could show no proof against him of anything. And so, you know, these accusations, again, have no basis. That, oh, there are no hadiths, you know, there are not very many hadiths in regards to the virtues of Ali radiallahu anhu. Yeah. And so, you know, and this, of course, these are statements that are being made by the same people that say that Imam Hussein al-Islam and Abdullah ibn Zubair were wrong for not giving allegiance to Yazid, and Yazid was the rightful ruler. So these are the same people telling us that, who then turn around and say, oh, you know, these hadiths in honor of Ali radiallahu and Ahlul Bayt, they're all fabricated. The fabrication, as we were talking about on Friday, the fabrication occurs, you know, fabrication is done by those who are in control. So you have Banu Umayyah who's in control, and yes, they fabricated a lot of hadiths in honor of themselves. And when that booklet is shown to Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, he says that this is all fabricated. That there are no hadiths, there are no authentic hadiths about the virtues of Banu Umayyah. Absolutely none. Imam Nasa'i says the same thing. Yet, you know, you look at the books and you got all these hadiths, well, all those hadiths are fabricated. Because the rulers, and this is what Ali radiallahu told us from the beginning. Ali radiallahu told us that many narrations will come to you. But before you even look in its direction, see if it's in line with the honor of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And if it's not, toss it to the side. So the interesting thing there is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, he talks about the sabiqun al-awwalun, that those who are first, they take sabqa, they take precedence over those who came later. All right? So if I look at those who came first, who came first? Who was the first of believers? Ali radiallahu anhu. The household of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam were the first to believe. Of the initial believers, like those who came into Islam like early, within the first, 2 or 3 years, from Banu Umayyah, the only one who came into Islam early on was Uthman radiallahu anhu. The rest of them came into Islam after Fatih Makkah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran that those who came later are not equal to those who came first. So you're going to have all of these hadiths, so-called hadiths, in honor of those who came later, about their praises and how their virtues, but you're not going to have anything in honor of the ones who were first. I mean, it just, of course, the audience that these people are talking to have no concept of this. So that's why they can get away with it. And this is one of those things that they use to get away with these things. They know who their audience is and how they can fool them. And the audience also is so comfortably fooled. They're happy being fooled. So you have, even like if I look at the Sahih Hadiths that are in Bukhari and Muslim, of course there are Sahih Hadiths in other books as well. But even the Hadiths in Bukhari and Muslim, it clearly shows the virtues of these people, their position. And, the Hadith is in Sahih Muslim where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that the Quran and my household will always be together. So it's interesting, I was looking at a book, and it mentions the hadith where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam says that Ali and the Quran will always be together. And they say, oh, this is fabricated. Well, why is it fabricated? Because it mentions Ali. Right, and that's why it's fabricated. Well, is Ali not a part of that household? Yeah. So if I look again, when was the household in rule or in control that they could have somebody fabricate these narrations for them, which of course they would never do, because they didn't need to do that. And they weren't. The other thing that's going on these days, and as we've talked about, this is how politics works, or one of the ways governments and entities, or entities that are being run by governments work, is that they if they have a certain thing that they want to push, like we've talked about before, like, okay, they're going to use this as an enemy. They want to use something as an enemy that people don't know about. They want to use a group that people don't know much about. And then that way they can feed them whatever they want to, and people will believe it. This is why Muslims are the enemy, because they take the Muslims and people don't know much about Islam or the Muslims. So now they can tell them, oh, see, Islam says this, the Muslims do this, and people believe it because the government says, oh, I'm here to save you, right? Or any other enemy that they choose. Same thing that they did, with communism and all these other isms, is, they would tell people, oh, this is what this is, and people would believe it, and then, have a whole media behind them to propagandize the people. But if you have something that people know about, now you've got to make them forget. You got to make them forget that. So you got a clean slate, and now you can feed them whatever you want. And this is what they've done with Karbala and Imam Hussein al-Islam and Ahlul Bayt. You know, it's interesting for almost 2 generations, you know, they won't talk about it. Oh, we don't talk about that. We don't talk about that. And suddenly now within these masajid where they said, oh, we don't talk about that, now they're talking about it. Because you have people that are clueless about this. Well, now they can feed them whatever they want. And if you listen to what they're saying, they're basically whitewashing the whole incident in reality. And now the people think, oh, this is the reality of what happened. Because they realize that, oh, there are people that are learning about this through other sources, so now they want to control the narrative. And not because they actually want to teach you about it, but they want to control the narrative. Because they don't want to lose people. They don't want people waking up to what they're doing. So you start seeing this now in various places that never talked about it before. Now suddenly they're talking about it. And that's why. Not because, oh, we are enlightened and we should have been talking, but we should be talking about this. No. It's because they want to control the narrative. Just like with the Mawlid, what do? Oh, we're having a Sira conference now. At the same time that you're having the Mawlid. Same people that said, oh, Mawlid is bid'ah and shirk and haram for decades are now saying, oh, we're going to have a Sira conference in Rabiul Awwal. So that the people don't go to the Mawlid gatherings. Yeah. So don't think that, oh, this is a good thing that they're doing. They have their own agenda. And they always have their own agendas. And it's sad that I have to be, kind of say this from a negative perspective, but that's the reality of the time we're in. Not the time we're in, that's the reality of the people that we're dealing with. All right. So I'm going to end here today unless somebody has some questions.
Oh, but the fasting.
So question about the fasting. So as far as the fasting of Ashura. So Ashura, of course, simply means the 10th of Muharram. Ashura Ashara is 10. And when you say Ashura, everybody understands you're talking about the 10th of Muharram. So the 10th of Muharram has been an auspicious day from the beginning of time. If you look at the list of things that happened on the 10th of Muharram, even the world that was created, the earth when it was created in that position. It was the 10th of Muharram. When the world ends, it will be the 10th of Muharram. Okay. We just don't know what year. Okay. The ship of the Ark of Nuh alayhi salam arrived as its destination, 10th of Muharram. So many other things that happened on this day. The Isa al-Islam being taken up, Yunus al-Islam being relieved or coming out of the whale. All of these things, 10th of Muharram. The most famous for us, of course, is the martyrdom of Imam Hussein al-Islam, or the infamous. But the other thing that is directly mentioned in hadith and multiple hadith is the emancipation of Bani Israel from Firaun. So this is when they attained their freedom from Firaun and got out of Egypt, was the 10th of Muharram. So when Rasulullah arrives in Medina Munawwara, the Jews of Medina Munawwara used to fast on the 10th of Muharram to celebrate the freedom of Bani Israel and Musa alayhi salam. Okay. So when Rasulullah arrives and they're doing this, or this is something that's known that they do, he asked them, why do they do this? And he's not asking because he doesn't know. And of course, all the people here understand that point. But I have to keep making it because just the environment that we're in. He's asking so that everybody else understands. Okay. So they say, they say that we do this because this is the day that Musa al-Islam attained freedom. Musa al-Islam and his people attained freedom from the people of Fir'aun and from Fir'aun and his people. So, out of gratefulness for that, we fast on this day. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he didn't say, oh, this is the way of the Jews, we're not going to do this. No. He said that Musa al-Islam has more right on us because we are the true acceptors of Musa al-Islam and his true message. And so we will also fast on the 10th of Muharram. Okay. So it's interesting that the Muharram fast, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did that before Ramadan fast became an obligation. The Ramadan fast didn't become an obligation until right after that. Okay. And he continued to do this. Okay. Then the last year, Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, who was a young man at this time, he approaches Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he says, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we fast on this day, right? But, this is the way of the Jews. And you've told us not to follow the way of, the Jews or the Christians. We have our own way. So again, here Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam didn't say, okay, now we're not going to fast anymore. He said, fine. He acknowledges what Abdullah ibn Abbas says. He says, fine. Then we will fast. Then he says, then fast either the 9th and the 10th or the 10th and the 11th to make it different from what the Jews are doing, right? So instead of fasting one day, we will fast 2 days, either the 9th and the 10th or the 10th and the 11th. And he says, if I am around next year, if I am here next year, then I will fast on the 9th and the 10th. And of course, when a prophet says, if this, that is, has a lot of deep meaning. And of course, by next year, he had already passed. Okay. So this is why, this is a sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself did not actually do, but he ordered us to do. So, for Ashura, like today is the 10th. Of course, we're getting, it's time for Dhuhr. So by this time in the field of Karbala, all of the friends of Imam Hussein alayhi salam who had come and all of those who had joined him from the few that were able to sneak in from Kufa and the other few that had joined him that had not left when the army started coming, they also are martyred by this point. And this is the time when the household will start to go out one by one, challenging the army of Yazid, and also reminding them of what they're doing and who they've come against. So that way, on the day of judgment, they will have no excuse, because people try to give this excuse that, they didn't really know who they were fighting against. Yeah, they did. They had no doubt who they're fighting against. And the household made sure of that. And Imam Hussein alayhi salam made sure of that. Okay. But, so again, as far as the fast, this is why we fast. Okay. But, the 10th of Muharram and the night of the 10th of Muharram, which was last night, has been an auspicious time from the beginning of time. And this is also why in the field of Karbala, the afternoon of the 9th, the army of Yazid started beating their drums, signaling their attack. And Imam Hussein Islam requests that, look, it's tonight is the 10th, so allow us to make worship tonight, and then you do with us. And this was the only request that he had made that they accepted. And it was late, so they said, fine, we'll do this tomorrow morning. And even that night, after Isha, he told those with him, he said, I'm pleased with you all, and those who wish to get out, in the darkness of the night, they are free to go. And of course, no one left. And then he told them to go to their tents and make worship or make ibadah or do ibadah or worship Allah that night. And we'll go over some of this more later, inshallah. Any other questions? No. So inshallah, we'll end here today. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide us. And of course, true guidance is His love and the love of His beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and fill our hearts with that love and the love of Ahlul Bayt, and to love the companions and all those whom they love. So it may make us understand the meaning of Karbala and how it relates to everything that is going on around us today. And also to be able to see the Karbalas of today. So akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.